Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Pollock. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar, Time is Money, the Hidden Costs of Manual Tax Compliance, presented by Connor O'Donnell and Cameron Murphy. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise to a minimum. However, throughout the webinar, you can submit any questions you have. So to submit a question, look for the question section in your GoToWebinar, and we're going to answer all those questions at the end of the presentation. In your GoToWebinar panel, you're also able to change the presentation layout, ask more questions, download a copy of the presentation along with a really informative infographic. And then we're also going to record this presentation, and it's going to be distributed tomorrow to all attendees, as well as those who registered but were unable to attend today. And then finally, we'd appreciate your participation in our poll and closing survey. And then with that, I'm thrilled that you've taken some time out of your busy day to be with us on this webinar. SWK is here to help you fulfill your vision of a smarter and easier way to run your business by providing you tools, support, software, and industry knowledge whenever you need it. So whether you're here to explore a new solution or you're just here to learn, don't hesitate to ask any questions you have. We're really happy today to have our really close partner, Avalara, with us. They are tax experts. So, we have the experts here. You can get any questions you have in. And with that said, it's enough from me, and I'm going to hand it over to Cameron and Connor so we can dive into the main event.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Courtney, for joining us, everyone, today for Time is Money, the Hidden Costs of Manual Tax Compliance. My name is Cameron Murphy. I'm a Senior Strategic Alliance Manager at Avalara, and I manage our relationships with our premier partners. I've worked with SWK personally for years and enjoy the opportunity to provide visibility on how we can help folks that need compliance get into a solution that fits for their business. If we go to the next slide, joining me is Connor O'Donnell. Connor, say hi to everyone.
Thank you, Cam, and great to be part of the conversation. Appreciate everyone in attendance today. My name's Connor, and I am one of Avalara's sales execs. I am specialized in the Acumatica space, and I've been in this role for almost 4 years at this point. And during those 4 years, I've had the privilege of partnering with SWK on countless projects to assist specifically their Acumatica customers with automating their compliance needs. But while I am specialized in Acumatica, today's conversation it's ERP agnostic. So whether you're on Acumatica, Sage, any other different ERP, our goal here is for you all to garner useful information about all things compliance and how to save money in this complex world that is compliance. So we'll roll into the agenda for today. So we've got a few different things that we're going to focus on here. First, we're just going to set the scene about tax compliance in general. Then we're going to go into our two big pillars of the conversation. First, talking about Nexus and how that impacts your overall business and how there's hidden fees associated with both Nexus and with audits. And then we'll go through and not just all be doom and gloom. We'll end it with talking about Avalara solutions. So specifically, the ROI that Avalara can bring to your business in regards to compliance. And we'll specifically go into a high-level demonstration of Avalara's products and showing the value add that they can bring to your specific business. So we will hop one more into the next slide. So starting off with tax compliance, it's complex in and of itself. With the ever-changing laws, rates, rules, the states don't make it easy for businesses like you all on today's webinar. And the tricky part is as your business scales, complexity in regards to compliance scales alongside you. So that's where Avalara comes into play. Ultimately, our value add and our core purpose as a business is to ease the burden of businesses like you all by automating your compliance related tasks. So highlighting just how complex modern day compliance is, as you can see here, the United States alone is fractured into more than 13,000 tax jurisdictions. Keeping track of sales tax rates in these 13,000 tax jurisdictions, if that wasn't complicated enough, managing the actual geographical boundaries of these jurisdictions, it's a feat in and of itself. So in Colorado, in one specific tax jurisdiction, in one specific zip code, there's over 13 different tax jurisdictions. So your company could send a product to a customer and then send the same product to that customer's neighbor. There could be two different tax rates. So we'll show in today's demo just how Avalara's products are able to delineate between different tax jurisdictions and get you that right taxation for your customers. So scaling out a little bit, especially since 2020, we've seen a trend in government compliance requirements for businesses becoming much more complex. And really the main reason that we have anecdotally heard this is that it's money. Sales tax is a major source of revenue for all states. About 50%, as you can see here, about 50% of the total revenues are coming from sales tax. So the states are looking for new and creative ways to increase their revenues, which includes changing laws to tighten nexus obligations, which we'll talk about in today's conversation, and putting pressure on businesses like yourself through increased audits. So that's why we're really focusing today's conversation on those two different topics, and that's where we're going to spend a bulk of today's webinar together. So with all this in mind, without automation, your business is probably taking on some unnecessary risk through manual oversight of compliance processes. I'm fortunate I get to chat with a lot of people each and every day. And when I am talking with prospective customers who are interested in Avalara, a lot of them are telling me that the big reason that they're interested in Avalara, why they started the conversation with Avalara, it's because their teams are burdened. They're doing a lot of mindless, endless manual tasks that could be offloaded through Avalara's products. And ultimately, our value add here at Avalara is understanding that every hour that you all as a business are spending on compliance, that's an hour taken away from other revenue generating activities for your specific business. So as we go into the next part, so we're going to talk about that first pillar, so Nexus. So let's talk about it. So a great jumping off point here is with a high level definition of Nexus. Nexus, in a nutshell, is simply a business's obligation to get registered in a specific state based on certain criteria, also known as Nexus triggers or Nexus thresholds. And Nexus is a hot button topic here at Avalara because it's become much more complicated in the last 5 years. Previously, Nexus, which again is just defined as your business's responsibility to get registered in a certain state because of certain business activities, was solely based off physical location. So if you had a brick and mortar office in North Carolina, where I'm at and located, you only needed to get registered in North Carolina. But if we hop to the next slide, we can see how it's gotten much more complex because that's not the case anymore. Now Nexus has different triggers such as economic nexus, affiliate nexus, marketplace nexus. So looking in all of these, it's become much more complex for businesses. It's something that you all, are having to monitor yourself if you're not utilizing a third party like Avalara. So let's zoom in a little bit and we'll focus first on economic nexus. So economic nexus is the I'd say the second most common trigger of nexus that I see when I'm chatting with folks like yourself. Economic nexus is really just comprised of two different data points. So it's the sales volume, which is in other words the number of transactions that you have into a state, or it's the sales revenue, in other words the dollar amount, the revenue amount that you're having in that specific state. So, what makes economic nexus so complicated is that each state has their own unique threshold requirements. And as you can see, as this color-coded map, I mean, we're not uniform in any color here. We've got 7 different colors all throughout here. So you can see some businesses have higher thresholds, like Texas and California and New York. They're dealing with $500,000 dollars of sales volume or 200 transactions. Then you can see from there as the colors get lighter, the thresholds become less. So we go 250 to 100,000. Sometimes it's $100,000 in revenue or 200 transactions. So this is something that if you're not utilizing a third party like Avalara, this is something that if you're selling across the nation, this needs to be your desktop default picture because as you're selling across the nation, you have to know these thresholds. Otherwise, you're putting yourself at risk, and there's a lot of hidden costs that come with this risk. And so, really, you'll hear this throughout today's conversation. The norm in compliance is there's nothing static about it. And economic nexus is no different in that regard. They're always changing the economic nexus thresholds. And where it gets even trickier for businesses like yourself is that there's no advertising, there's no marketing campaign by the state governments to let businesses like yourself know when these changes have occurred. If you're expecting like a billboard or something advertising that Utah did not drop the 200 transaction threshold, uh, don't hold your breath because it's not something that they highly advertise because they do want businesses to trip up on this so then that they can collect more via an audit, which we'll talk about next. So I know that we've got a lot of different folks on today's conversation and a lot of different business with a lot of different business profiles. And you might be thinking, hey, this is all informative, Connor, but my business, we either work with tax exempt customers or we as a business are providing tax exempt services and offerings. So Nexus doesn't relate to me. Um, Unfortunately, I've got to dissuade you of that notion. This is not the case. Exempt sales can make a very tangible impact on economic nexus, as we see here in the next slide. Economic nexus sales thresholds by state are something that you as a business need to take into consideration if you are selling outside of, if you're selling across the nation and you do have exempt sales. So let's look at a few of these and maybe we'll hit on some that you and your business specifically are working in. So as you can see here, we've got a couple different color codings here. I'll pull out just a few just for us to highlight. So if we look at Texas, North Carolina, Ohio, these are all color coded in orange. Any state on this map that's color coded in orange, these are states that take exempt sales into their economic nexus threshold. So you can see it's the lion's share of states are taking your gross sales, your taxable and your exempt sales into consideration. But we've got a few nuances here that I'll call out. So California and New York in purple. This is kind of interesting because they take exempt sales into consideration for economic nexus, but they don't take into account exempt services. So there's a delineation between the two that businesses have to be mindful of. And then we've got a few here, just about a handful, about 5 that are in blue. And those are ones that are just taking into account taxable sales. So unfortunately, it would be easier if it was flipped, where most states were just taking into account taxable sales, but it's the inverse. Most states across the nation are taking into account your total sales amount, taxable and exempt, into these economic nexus thresholds. Now, while physical and economic nexus are the two most common forms of nexus that I see when chatting with folks, I still wanted to list out all the different nexus creating activities because your business might be accidentally triggering them without your knowledge. So some of the common ones that I hear most often from my clients, attending a trade show is a very popular one. Um, Inventory located in a different location via a third party is pretty common as well. And then especially for my customers who are working with exempt customers, drop shipment. That's a big one that can trigger Nexus unintentionally to businesses. But as you can see, it's a long list of Nexus creating activities that you as a business need to be accountable for if you're not utilizing a third party like Avalara. So a prominent focus of this webinar, like I alluded to earlier, is the hidden costs associated with compliance. And like I mentioned, I've worked with at Avalara for 4 years, and I found that customers not understanding their Nexus requirements is it's truly hands down the most expensive hidden cost of being out of compliance. The reason being is there's just so many financial implications of being out of compliance when it comes to Nexus. And states we are seeing now, like I said, ever since 2020, states are much more aggressive in claiming any lost sales tax revenue that should have been collected in their state. So that's why it's vital whenever I'm chatting with folks like yourself. So any prospective customers of Avalara, always start with making sure that their Nexus footprint is taken care of, it's accurate, it's up to date, we know where they need to be registered before we go into talking about software, because we need to understand your Nexus footprint before we can successfully implement a fully automated solution. So how we figure out this footprint is via our sales tax risk assessment. So this isn't something that you necessarily need to do yourself in order to partner with Avalara. We can actually do it on your behalf. So Avalara's sales tax risk assessment, in a nutshell, y'all, is just it's a self-guided questionnaire in which you're giving specific information about your business, where you're selling into, what type of sales that you have into these states, and then we're going to take all of your data points and all of your responses, combine them all together, and then our tax directory team, who are all actually previous auditors. We've got one from who was the previous auditor for the state of California. One was a previous Washington auditor. So we've got folks who are looking at your data through a lens that an auditor would. And then they take your results, they take your data points and then generate results and say, you need to get registered in these 15 states, and this is how you need to get registered in them. And this is all the previous liability that you need to take into account and pay before we get you registered. So you're going into this with eyes wide open, knowing exactly what the financial implications of getting registered in those states would be, and we put it in this nice clean format for you. In addition to just giving you the data, we're also sitting down with you and having a 1 hour conversation between you, your business, and Avalara's tax director who made these determinations for you. So you can ask them any and all questions that you might have, and they're super, super knowledgeable. So at the end of today's conversation, we're going to have a free promo code for you to get a risk assessment for free. It typically retails at $4,950, so $50 short of $5,000. So rather than you having to pay for that, by attending today's webinar, by learning about Avalara and all things compliance, we're going to give you a QR code at the end for you to get a free one. So very cool incentive here. But let's switch gears now and let's talk all things audit. So um, we're switching from Nexus to audits. Uh, and really, this is where the hidden fees come into play, because if your Nexus is out of play and out of compliance, ultimately your audit is not going to be a very pleasurable experience. So we'll jump into it. So just kind of like jury duty, you're not going to know if your business is getting selected for an audit until you receive a letter in the mail from the government. So not a fun piece of snail mail to get. But in the interim, there are definitely several things that we can do together through a partnership with Avalara and your business to reduce your risk of non-compliance and reduce the hidden fees that will come about from an audit. So, as I've discussed, the first and most important thing in my opinion, for y'all to do to limit that exposure is understanding your Nexus footprint across the nation. But there's other things too that we'll talk about here as we continue on. So outside of understanding your nexus, there are a few other triggers that an audit that I always say, tell folks that you should note going into it. The one I hear most often is really that an audit was generated for a business because their customers were audited first. Um, the second one that I hear is fulfilled by Amazon, so FBA. That's a pretty common trigger for an audit that I hear from customers who are either using e-commerce or marketplace sales. So those are the two most common triggers that I see for audits. So this slide, I mean, if I had to put a buzzword or it in a nutshell, it's virtual. Um, as you all know, COVID completely changed, not just, it changed everything, right? It changed how we work, it changed where we work. And what it did is it also changed how audits work as well. So everything is now digital, everything is virtual. And, if you're looking like through clear eyes, no rosy colored glasses, you're looking at your compliance and maybe you're relying on paper exemption certificates that are sitting in a filing cabinet behind you, or um, maybe you're utilizing an Excel sheet that's uber convoluted. This is going to make an audit much more difficult for you because their auditors are now asking for everything to be digitized and everything to be able to be provided virtually. So this is where Avalara as a business we come into play. we're in the business of virtualizing and digitizing our customers' compliance, not just their compliance state, but their compliance processes. So as we wrap up, this topic of audits, to sum it up, I mean, there's really just no way for you to avoid an audit entirely. So the best way for you to ultimately prepare for that audit that's going to come is to take the guesswork out of it, and it's to take the risk out of human error that unintentionally happens. We're all human. We're trying our best, but rather than using manual processes, you can utilize a automated solution like Avalara to make sure that these processes are tight, they're ready to go, they're streamlined for that inevitable audit. So let's switch gears. We kind of set the scene. So now let's talk a little bit about Avalara, one as a business for an ROI proposition, and then we'll go next into a high level, I won't say demo, but more a high level explanation of our products. So heading into the next slide. So um, Avalara performed a pretty exciting third party, exciting study with a third party research company called Forrester. And in this study, we really just kind of analyzed what is the economic impact of utilizing Avalara. Essentially, what's the ROI for businesses like you all in today's conversation in having an Avalara partnership? So if we go to the next slide, we broke that down for you. So, there's a lot of information on this slide. I'll give you the high level of it. So, Forrester found that a company that's roughly $25 million in revenue would achieve a 102% ROI with a payback period to Avalara within 6 months. So, the total benefits are roughly 500,000, so roughly half a million over a 3-year span after using Avalara and moving away from more manual compliance processes that we've alluded to in today's conversation. So um, I know not everyone on the call is a $25 million company. So if your company has annual revenue less than that, you can roughly adjust the metrics in accordance with your company's specific annual revenue. But the other really interesting thing that I want to note here before we move on is the results had some measurable benefits, but they also had some more intangible benefits as well. So the measurable benefits of partnering with Avalara, they include some of the things you'd expect. Hours spent on your personnel, so labor savings, FTE hours saved, related to tax research, tax filings, exemption certificate management. We found that folks that partnered with us had improved efficiency in audit preparation, like we've talked about in today's conversation. They avoided penalties from those audits. And overall, the businesses that partnered with Avalara, Forrester found that they ultimately reduced their sales tax liability. But not everything is quantifiable, right? Some things are just more intrinsic that we just kind of feel in our gut. So we have some non-quantifiable benefits that Forrester found from their study of Avalara. First one was there was more ease of businesses expanding into new jurisdictions, so new states, new specific locations within those states by partnering with Avalara. There was also an increased confidence in tax compliance. Folks that utilize a partnership with Avalara just feel better knowing that they're doing it right because Avalara is taking the guesswork out of it and we're providing accuracy. That's just a guarantee of being an Avalara customer. And then, as I mentioned before, another more intrinsic benefit of partnering with Avalara from these results were the businesses that are partnered with Avalara, they could focus on what made their business their business. So they were focused on their core business versus having to focus on tax compliance, which doesn't, necessarily move their business forward in whatever sector that they're located in. So, this webinar is titled about time and money. So really just the nice thing about this, wrapping up the Forrester, is that the value add to our customers is giving time back to you all that you could focus on putting back and reinvesting in your business. Let Avalara handle compliance. You can do what you need to do to move your business forward. Alrighty, so let's go into the fun part. These are the solutions at Avalara. I can talk about this part day in and day out because this is really where Avalara differentiates ourselves in the space is by the robustness of our products. So we'll hop into it. So this slide, we'll go ahead and just go through all, we'll just put all of them up on the slide, and then I'll just go through the process flow. So you might not be familiar with Avalara and how our process works. Um, we'll start here at the bottom with systems. So whatever system that you're using, whether it's an ERP like Acumatica or Sage, whether it's an e-commerce platform like Shopify, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, you name it, whatever system that you're using, whenever you're saving an invoice, that invoice will flow up to AvidTax, which is our tax engine, which says tax determination. It'll pull apart the specifics of your invoice, make a tax determination on that invoice, and then push it back into your system with the correct tax aligned to each and every line item of that invoice if needed. Um, if you come over here to the left side, not, some customers, some folks that we work with are dealing with just taxable customers. Lion's share of the folks that I chat with are dealing with a mix of exempt customers and taxable customers. So our product suite is aligned to align with that specific business makeup of dealing with taxable and non-taxable customers. So if you follow that exact same process flow, the invoice is saved in your system, calls up to our tax engine. Our tax engine will then make a simultaneous call to our exemption certificate management system to say, hey, is this customer taxable or not? And so how we do it is we have stored, virtualized, and digitized in that system every single one of your exemption certificates for your non-taxable customers. So think of it like a Rolodex. It'll roll through in under a sub-second to say, hey, we've got customer XYZ's exemption certificate on file. This is a non-taxable customer, therefore a non-taxable invoice. Don't align sales tax to the invoice. And then inversely, if our system does not find that customer's exemption certificate, it'll make the assumption this is a taxable customer, continue on with all the specifics of the tax determination for this invoice. So all this is happening in under a sub-second. It takes me longer to explain it than it does to actually happen. And then once we've made that tax determination, if you go to the right-hand side of that slide really quickly, we'll then file and remit that return on your behalf. So the sales tax engine, AvidTax, is not only making the tax determinations, but also on the back end, it's storing any sales tax data that's accumulated on your behalf. And then when it comes time to file in the states that you're registered in, our tax engine will push that sales tax data over to our returns platform to then file and remit on your behalf. So really nifty that it's just two systems talking together. There's no need for manual oversight. You're not pulling reports to then upload them to the Department of Revenue website. Again, you're just letting automation happen at its finest. So if we click through, you can see all the different sides of tax compliance. We've got the business transaction side and the tax compliance side. So we talked about the first three products on that right-hand side. We'll go a little bit deeper, excuse me, on that left-hand side. We'll go a little bit deeper into those products, but then we'll also make sure to address the right-hand side of this screen for our different products. So we'll dive into each of these now. If we could go to the next screen, that'd be great. Alrighty. So Avitech. So I kind of gave you a high level view of it. Just to tell you a little bit more about it. So Avitex is able to get into the minutia of your invoicing. I know a lot of times folks are dealing with a lot of different line items with varying different taxability of those line items. So for example, maybe you're sending out a product to a customer and on that invoice you also have shipping. Our tax engine, Avitax, will pull apart each and every line item on that invoice and make a specific tax determination for each one of those line items. So you can have a taxable product with an exempt service like shipping or installation, and that's not going to mess up our tax engine. We're able to align to whether you have one line item on your invoice or you have 100 or 1,000 line items on your invoice. Our tax engine is robust enough to be able to break that apart. And we're also managing on the back end, our tax engine is monitoring all 13,000 tax jurisdictions that we talked about earlier in the webinar. It's monitoring all those different jurisdictions on the back end. So if the state changes, let's say they change the rate from 7.25 to 7.5, there's no need for any manual oversight for your team. Our tax engine is just going to make that change. And because it's in the cloud, whenever that invoice calls up to our tax engine, it's got all the updated tax rates, the taxability rules, the sourcing rules, and nexus rules applied to it already. So you all can focus on other things. And again, we'll take care of this side of the taxable liability for you. So not everything is taxable, right? We also are dealing with customers who are tax exempt for a variety of different reasons. So ECM is Avalara's exemption certificate management system, and we talked about how it integrates into our tax engine to allow for correct taxation. But just telling you a little bit more about some of the features of ECM. So ECM is going to revolutionize how you onboard new customers who are exempt. So rather than you having to fight back and forth with your customer to get that right certificate when you bring them on board, you'll simply send them ECM, so Avalara's Exemption Certificate portal, and then all you have to do is click what state they're located in and the reason for their exemption certificate. So if they're a reseller in North Carolina, where I'm at, you click North Carolina, you click reseller, and our system's going to send them the North Carolina resale exemption certificate. Your customer will electronically sign, it uploads into the system, and then from there, our ECM is then managing the life cycle of that certificate because you might be aware of it, you might also not be aware of it, but exemption certificates expire, but they also expire at different cadences state by state. Because again, like I said, nothing in compliance is easy and nothing in compliance is static. So how this works, we'll know on the back end when each exemption certificate is going to expire, and then we'll send out a certificate request to that customer 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever timeline you want us to adopt, we'll send a new request to that customer when it's about to expire. So not only are we collecting that new certificate when a customer comes on board, we're managing that certificate for as long as you have that engagement with that customer. So as long as your partnership with that customer exists, we'll take care of the compliance for the exempt side for you as long as that partnership exists. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our managed services offering because a lot of times when I'm speaking with individuals, they are dealing with a little bit of a mess when it comes to their exemption certificates. Sometimes it's the paper format, it's the filing cabinet that's just we put stuff in there and we don't check it because we don't want to look under the rug. But while that does occur more often, it's just we have some exemption certificates. Maybe we haven't been collecting them as frequently as we should, or maybe we haven't been updating them when they expire as much as we should. That's kind of a little bit more of the common scenario that I find when chatting with folks. So this is where our managed services program comes into play. So during implementation, if you do partner with Avalara and you do utilize our exemption certificate management platform, we have a managed services program in which our team, so actual people who work at Avalara, they're located in our Durham, North Carolina office. These are the folks that are going to work with you, figure out your customer list of exempt customers, and then this team of managed services professionals will request, they'll collect, and then once they've pulled in all those needed exemption certificates, they'll then validate and verify that they're correct, and then upload them into your instance of ECM during implementation. So a lot of times when I'm speaking with individuals, they're like, "Oh, we just have a lot of work to do there." We're able to do that work for you. And again, it's people who are located in North Carolina, so they're going to treat your customers well. We're going to work with you in lockstep to make sure you're updated and well informed of the campaigns that we're doing here. So we talked about Avalara returns. I'll just kind of briefly touch on some other things here. We talked about how the process flow works, but Avalara returns is completely automating your process when it comes to filing returns. So you'll maintain liability review. You'll be able to see in your dashboard how much we're going to remit to each state. But the really nifty part about returns is that we're just replicating your filing frequency and then automating it. So if you're filing monthly in Ohio, or if you're filing quarterly in South Carolina, or you're filing annually in California, Avalara Returns knows that filing frequency and will just pull and then remit the funds necessary at that time. So it's really just about setup, and then from there, once you get a setup and know what your filing calendar is and your filing frequency is, it's rinse and repeat at that point because again, it's two products just talking together. It's our tax engine pushing that sales tax data over to our returns platform to file and remit on your behalf via an ACH pull. Alrighty, two more products here. So these Avalara 1099. So if you're dealing at all with W-9s, 1099s, business licenses, this Avalara 1099 is going to automate your process in a very similar fashion to our exemption certificate management system. So we'll manage the entire life cycle of that 1099. We'll manage the renewal of that 1099, that business license, that W-9, whatever that specific document it is. So think of it as an end-to-end document management system for your licenses, your permits, any of those professional documents. And then last one, this one is actually one of my favorite products here at Avalara. So Avalara Tax Research. So a lot of times when I'm chatting with individuals about their compliance process, there's just a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of, well, I'm not sure how our products are taxed. Well, I'm not sure our Nexus footprint. And a lot of times people are just looking for advisement because compliance nowadays is as clear as mud. So this is where Avalara Tax Research comes into play. Think of it like a verified Google and Wikipedia for all things compliance. So you can put in the specific scenarios that you have of your business, and then Avalara Tax Research will let you know if it's taxable, exempt, and give you yes, no answers to even your most complicated compliance scenarios. Yeah, I know SWK works with a lot of different customers, but I find that Avalara Tax Research is a big value add for more of those complicated industries. Construction is one that comes to mind. Software as a service is another that comes to mind. So you can put in your most complicated construction scenarios or any of your compliance scenarios, no matter your industry, and we'll give you a easy to read yes no answer, and then we'll link to the tax law or the tax citation that our tax researchers use to make that tax determination of yes no. So everything is backed by audit. Everything is 100% accuracy guaranteed when you get that yes no answer from Avalara Tax Research. And the nice part too is if you ever have any follow-up questions, you can click contact the expert, ask whatever specific follow-up question you might have, and our tax research team will follow up with you within 48 hours with a verified follow-up response to that answer. So again, you do have software, but there's always people on the back end here at Avalara to help you out because like I said, compliance is murky, so we are here to help with all facets of it. Alrighty, y'all. Well, I appreciate everyone's attendance. I appreciate everyone's engagement in today's conversation. So, like I mentioned before, Um, if you do want to schedule a conversation with Avalara, we've got the first QR code here where you can scan this and then we'll go ahead and reach out to you. If you are in the Acumatica space, you'll be working with me. So I'll look forward to learning more about your business. But if you're working with a different ERP, I've got nothing but amazing colleagues beside me that you'll be able to utilize if you are interested in partnering with Avalara. And so we do have our contact information here, myself and Cameron, uh, for you to utilize. So I promised you a free sales tax risk assessment promo code right here. So take a screenshot. Again, this is a essentially a $5,000 value that you'll get for free for attending today's webinar. You'll get your results within 24 to 48 hours. But again, this is, if you ever have any questions about Nexus, this is where I always have folks start off. And so with this, you're going to get that value for free. So I'll give everyone a second just to take a screenshot or use your camera to get that QR code in. Alrighty, 5 seconds. Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right. So we wanted to end today's conversation with a poll question. We want to reach out to y'all. Would you like to schedule a discussion with Avalara to reduce the hidden compliance costs? So let us know if you want us to reach out to you. We've got some specific responses that you can give, whether it's yes, within the month, within 3 months, maybe, but I'd like more information first or not at this time because we want to reach out to you at the time that fits your business best. So your results would be very beneficial for us to make sure we're in alignment here.
Yes, and we're going to leave this poll open for just a couple more seconds, and then I think we're going to dive into some Q&A. I've seen some questions coming throughout, Connor.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to close that out. And yeah, you ready to dive into some of these questions we've had?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, one of the questions we had come through from their audience is, when you hit an economic threshold, are you going to be automatically registered in that state?
No, so it's always a business decision if you do or do not want to get registered in that state. Avalara through our Nexus study, but we also have an economic Nexus heat map that's built into our Avalara dashboard. Between those two, we're giving you the visibility into where you need to get registered, but ultimately you maintain autonomy if you do or do not want to get registered in that state.
Okay, great to know. Um, I think we might have touched on this, but do I need to change anything in my ERP to use Avalara?
Nope, we've got pre-built integrations into I would say every ERP that SWK customers are utilizing currently. And if for some reason you're using a system that we don't have, one of our 1,000 plus pre-built integrations into, we're able to connect into your ERP system, or your point of sale system, or your e-commerce system via an API integration. So no issues there on connection.
Okay, great. And then another question that we had from the audience is, did I hear that if I join SST and have Avalara as my certified provider, they will calculate and file for free in the states where I trigger Nexus?
Yep. So Streamline Sales Tax, or SST, is a program that we're a CSP for, so certified partner for, service provider for. And so I always, whenever I hear free, I'm a little leery, like, okay, well, what's the catch? How it actually works is that the state provides benefits to Avalara for having participants in the SST program, and then we just pass those savings on to you. So that's where that's the back story of what free is there. But yes, we were able to provide um, free of charge transactions in qualifying SST states. So there's 24 of them. And then we'll also provide free sales tax remittances, so filings in those 24 qualifying SST states.
Okay. And then, Connor, can you tell me, where do you see most businesses being audited and receiving fines?
Exemption certificates. I think the common one, not having an exemption certificate on file. Uh, Auditors are people too. Much as we want to demonize them, they are people too. They have good days and bad days. And so if an auditor is feeling a little bit more aggressive, if you don't have an exemption certificate on file for a non-taxable customer, they are within their rights to treat that invoice and that partnership and relationship, however long that engagement has been with that customer, as taxable, and then claim that you need to get back taxes for that, what should be exempt relationship, which should be exempt uh, invoice, we'll say history. Um, so that's one way. And then the other way, again, is just through not having your Nexus footprint taken care of. That's a big way that audits can happen, and unclaimed previous sales tax liability can culminate for businesses like the folks on today's webinar.
Okay, and I think, we might just have one more question before we close things out, unless we have a last minute submission. Um, but should I just have a database for certificates I can reference, or should I link them to each transaction?
Yep. So how we work is we're built in to, so our exemption certificate management system is built into your ERP. So specifically like for Acumatica, our exemption certificate management system is built into Acumatica. So whenever you're making that invoice, it's going to figure out, is this an exempt transaction because of the service? Is this an exempt transaction because of the customer? Is this an exempt transaction because of where you as the invoicer are located? So our system is able to make that determination on all the different levels based off the exempt classification, whether it's at the customer level, the project level, or ultimately the invoicer level.
Okay, Awesome. Well, I think that is our last, always looking for that last minute submission, but that looks like it's our last question for the day. So thank you, Connor. That was a lot of great information. If you're like me and, throughout you were like, I need to know this, and then he hit you with something else, you can download that handout of the PowerPoint presentation and also a cool infographic from that study that Avalara did. And then with that, I just want to say thank you, Connor, for taking the time to be with us today, and thank you to everyone out in the audience for taking some time out of your day to be with us. And with that, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right, everyone. Have a great Thursday.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.